Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. Today we are doing another Street Fighter character. We are drawing Akuma. It's been a little bit since I've done one of the Street Fighter characters. It's been even longer since I've done Akuma. This time, much like with Ken, we are just sort of sticking with the classic design. I thought maybe about doing the Street Fighter 6 design because that's a fairly radically different one, but I think I prefer to just do... I think I would just sort of prefer to do the classic, especially given that today we're going to be talking a little bit about expressions and posing. So I've got a little bit of weird stuff to talk about with posing, so you'll see what I mean when I get to it. Same with the expression stuff. So yeah, anyways, I'll roll the intro and then I'll show you what I have. Okay, so this is what we've got. Originally, I intended on doing something which was a bit of a reference to Akuma's pose from the Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter art. Because in that, it's the sort of really high angle shot of Akuma looking up and screaming, and I think that's a cool piece of art. So I initially wanted to do something which referenced that, but I couldn't really get the sort of high angle thing to work. So I decided to make it front facing, but it's still the same sort of thing at the end of the day. So yeah, as you can probably tell, this is a bit of a weird pose. So what I've kind of gone for is something which is a bit like Akuma's sort of pose. I don't know exactly how to describe the pose, but it's one of his victory animations where he sort of flexes forward, he sort of hunches down and leans in, and shimmers. He shudders and flexes intensely. And normally says shush. So that's what we're dealing with here. That's the sort of pose that we've got going on here. Something kind of like that, but sort of front facing. There's still some perspective going on here. Like this leg is very far forward, so we're getting a bit of an intense kind of perspective on that. And sort of the robe is all sort of billowing out and then being kind of blasted back by the way he's kind of like stretching his chest out like that, as you can see. So that's sort of really intensifying things that way, and obviously you've got the hands and everything. His arms are really big and shredded. So yeah, that is that is a big intention of this, is that he's pretty shredded. As Akuma normally is. So yeah, when it comes to the posing stuff, it's just those sort of weird things like that. Now there's a sort of an element of weirdness to this, in that I think this might be the most individual pieces of reference I've ever used in a single character, because this took 11 pieces of reference, 11 individual pieces of reference to sort of cobble together this pose and sort of figure something out. And a lot of that I also just had to wing it entirely. Again, I don't normally stick that close to the reference. So again, a lot of this stuff is just sort of there were 11 individual pieces of reference which I started with, and then I ended up just whittling all that down into this sort of different pose, which obviously doesn't particularly resemble any of the pieces of reference themselves. That is the sort of the reason why you use something like the Frankenstein method, as I call it, where you get a various different pieces of reference and then you collage them together, and then you use that as your reference and you start from there and sort of form the pose that you want, and then you either use parts of it more directly, or you just look at it and then start drawing from there. But yeah, this is obviously, I think obviously it's very evident that the way I draw is very heavily referenced. So that's the thing. But yeah, so the other thing I wanted to talk about was expressions. I feel like I've talked about everything I need to with the posing, because the pose, it's just a bit of a weird pose. There's certain things like his legs are very thick. And I wanted it to come across that Akuma is kind of small, because in a lot of stuff he does seem like he's kind of short. He's typically depicted as kind of short. So that's sort of what I've gone for here, is that he seems kind of short. Like his legs aren't particularly long, even if you were to stretch that leg out. He's not got particularly long legs. He's not got a particularly long torso. He's got quite a squat physique, of where he's really big and thick and broad, but he's not particularly long. It's all fairly condensed and squished down to where he's very sort of big and thick but small. but not very tall. So yeah, now I want to talk about the expressions. So I gave him a very, very intense expression. I think, now that I think about it, I might have actually, I might have, the head here, I might have used the same piece of reference as I did for that Wolverine one I did a little while ago, because ultimately the sort of expression is kind of similar, and I think that might be because I was looking at the same piece of reference whenever I was doing it. Anyways, I suppose, regardless of that, with Akuma has a sort of a weird kind of face. He's pretty much entirely hairless on the front, and the reason, he doesn't have eyebrows or anything like that, and so a lot of that comes down to the sort of the demon thing that they've got going on with him. So I decided to sort of give him these really kind of weird, pronounced kind of forehead lines that dip in like this, that sort of dip in and then wrap around and form these sort of harsh, really, really hard lines around his brow. And then obviously he's got these sort of really, again, because he's screaming, he's doing this really intense expression. Whenever you have an expression like that, you get these really kind of, pretty ugly stretch lines on your face, which is what we've got going on here, where he's got the sort of crow's feet and then a few stretch lines underneath his eye. And then obviously the forehead is getting intense as well, so you're getting these little lines up here where it's like, the forehead is like really straining because the way he's sort of furrowing and going crazy like that you're sort of getting these kind of really intense anger lines on his forehead, and then the sort of his very pronounced sort of jaw here as well. It's not as big as I originally intended it to be, so I might actually extend his jaw out a little bit. But obviously his chin is coming down because his mouth is so wide, and there's obviously these very intense lines going around his nose and his mouth, and they're all sort of hooking up like that there. And then the way that the brow is sort of furrowing is creating these sort of weird extra, like stretches over the brow like that. Is there, what else did I need to touch on here? And so obviously whenever you're getting an expression that intense, you're going to see a lot of that coming out in the neck. So here in the neck, he's got the really kind of stretched out neck. So you're getting these sort of straight lines down there. I'm not sure if that's coming out on my camera, but yeah, you're getting these sort of stretch lines from the collarbone up, and that's sort of where a lot of those are coming from. Obviously because he's stretching his chest out because he's really, really ripped, you're getting these really long kind of stretch lines across his chest. And it's the same thing with his arms, of where because he's really, really straining and screaming, you're getting these sort of long lines through the wrist that are sort of like really intense. And it's also a thing of where I'm not really sure what you call it, but the sort of like over muscling of a character is something which I've gone for here with Akuma, because he is that sort of character of where he is sort of like almost like grotesquely muscular. That's sort of how they made his model in something like Street Fighter 6. Even in his classic design, if anything in his classic design, it's more evident in that game that he's got these really like almost horrifyingly intense stretch lines, and like the muscle is bursting through his skin sort of look to him. And so yeah, I've gone for that here, where he's got these really, really intense lines where like even the abs here, it's sort of like really harsh straight lines moving through everything, and it's forming these just again huge stretches. And again you've got like, again it's just sort of bursting through him. And even like his ankle here is huge, and he's got the sort of stretches moving up through his foot and stuff like that. Again, probably should be maybe a little bit more stretching going on here. He does have very thick toes, which I suppose is something worth noting. Wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, for a minute there I thought I gave him 6 toes on that foot, but yeah, that's something I'll obviously have to get to later. But yeah, I think by using the classic design for this, it sort of allows me to showcase some more of how the expression affects the rest of the body. So whenever you're like really getting into it, really screaming, you're going to get a lot of these sort of extra lines throughout the body, where the big stretches across the chest, big stretches and straining through the arms. And then obviously you can't really see the legs all that much because of obviously the big baggy trousers, but you can see a little bit in the foot, of where it's like, oh, the blood is being rushed to his head, so it's sort of like drying out his feet. And all this stuff, and it's sort of, again, you're getting all these sort of stretch lines through his body, of where he's like, it's like really going crazy. But yeah, and his hair is standing up a little bit more than it might normally. I think. I think I maybe made it. It made it that it's standing, it's sort of blasting out a bit more than normal. But Akuma's hair is a bit of a challenge to draw, anyways. So yeah, that'll be something I'll have to cover here in a minute. I'll have to go over that. Yeah, I'll have to draw that hair again. And yeah, as I say, it is not easy. It's just it's all layering really with Akuma's hair. It's all about layering, and then just sort of having these sort of lines flick out like that, things like this. Because yeah, you got the few prominent like sort of hair spikes around the sides, and then you sort of just layer them up and around the back. Or you have just sort of have it implied that there's more going on back there. That's all you really need to do. And then he's got his little bun at the top. But yeah, yeah, I suppose it's maybe something to say that the beads are underneath the robe here, where sometimes in a lot of stuff they're over. Sometimes again, it depends. It varies wildly whether or not the beads are inside or outside his robe, but they're always there. Anyways, I think I have rambled enough. I think it's probably about time that I started drawing this thing. So I will do these details, and then I will be back to introduce the colors, which again, there's not many of those, so it shouldn't be too hard. But yeah. Okay, so that's our details done. That took a lot longer than I wanted it to. That was 2.5 hours near enough. So yeah, right. So I didn't change anything really. I didn't alter anything. I maybe reorganized. I sort of changed his feet a little bit. I made the a lot of the lines a little bit more pronounced. And sort of made it that, yeah, you can sort of see the sort of stretching of the skin. Again, you can see it more on this foot as well with the bottom, the sort of leatheriness of the bottom of his feet. The man doesn't wear shoes, so there's going to be a certain level of that. So I applied some of that sort of like weathering to the bottom of his foot to the skin, much the same way that he has on his arms and his chest. And very much so on his face because of how intensely he is screaming. So the color is sort of where some of this stuff is going to get a little bit more interesting. He doesn't have many colors. He's got, what, 3 colors? He's got, well, aside from the sort of, well, let me just count them all. He's got a skin tone, he's got his eyes, he's got his tongue, he's got his hair, he's got the brown, he's got the black. That's it, the 6 colors. Very little. Now granted, obviously a lot of these colours cover a lot of space, but I'm just going to be using the same brown for the beads as I am for the gloves, as I am for the rope. Because that'll just make my life a little easier to do stuff like that. The painting is largely where a lot more of this is going to come in, because that's where a lot of our intensity is going to be sold, is in shading. I'm also going to be doing an effect with his eyes where I'm probably going to have a little bit of glow going on, something like that, just to sort of give it a bit more kind of intensity so that you've got the glow coming off the eyes. Bit of a smear maybe I'll have. We'll see. The background I will probably just have... I was thinking of have it be... yeah, I was thinking of have it be black with the 10 symbol in the background and have it be really big and glowing. But I think what I might do instead is have it be black with sort of fiery red smoke around, sort of lingering around in the background, and maybe even just sort of, I don't know. I'll have a think about that because the background isn't super important right now. I might just, even realistically speaking, I might even just have a sort of gradient of sort of red to black at the top, something like that. Just sort of do my eye smears and stuff like that. With these Street Fighter ones, I've sort of been doing a lot of crazy stuff with the background, which I don't think I've really needed to do. With Ken, it definitely added a lot, with sort of having the sort of fire smear in the background, or with Juri having the sort of wavelength pattern, or with Sakura having the blossoms falling. It's the type of thing which I do think adds something. It certainly makes the image a little bit more interesting in the end. But yeah, I think it's something which I'm going to have a think about whether or not I do anything with it. Because granted, the 10 symbol isn't exactly challenging to draw. I can do it in about 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 4 lines. I can do it in 4 lines. I just need to make my brush pretty thick. So really, it's not that much of a challenge. I could do it. We'll see. We'll see what I think about that, because again, it is doable. It's not that hard. So I'll have a think about it with the background stuff. I'll probably maybe do something with the kind of red smoke idea. I might do sort of like a fiery red sort of emerging from the background. I might still do the sort of gradient of black to red, and then have some paint that sort of trickles up that gives it sort of like a fiery pattern so that it looks like fire, like red fire moving up through the black, something like that. That might look interesting. That's more of a painting thing though, so that's something which we don't have to worry about for a little bit. Yeah, is there anything I really need to cover with these colors? I'm probably gonna redden up Akuma's skin tone a little bit, because that's something you get more in, well, I suppose looking at like the Marvel superheroes versus Street Fighter art, the X-Men versus Street Fighter art, you get a little bit more of the sort of reddening of the skin. His skin is very red. He has a very red toned skin. So I'll probably go for something like that, something sort of deep and kind of reddish for his skin tone, because yeah, it varies. It's sometimes more of a sort of a golden sort of color, sometimes more of a sort of reddy brown color, his skin tone. So we'll have a think about that. It's obviously going to be the first thing I lay in. Since he's got a darker skin tone, I don't have to do the background for a little bit. Actually, you know what, since all of his colors are dark, I don't have to do the background for a bit. It'll probably be the last thing I do in this section. But yeah, I don't think there's anything else I need to really cover with this or with the colors. I think I'll just get into this. I'll probably do a little bit of the background during this section, not all of it, because I'll have to do some paints and stuff like that later. But yeah, I'll do these colors, and then I'll be back to do the painted shading. So yeah. Okay, that is our colours done. I ended up spending a little longer on that than I needed to because I wanted to sort of get that 10 symbol right in the background. I wanted to try and find a good calligraphy kind of brush for it. And I think I found one that sort of works. Again, the character is covering most of it, so it doesn't really matter that much. And a degree of this is going to get obscured because I want to do the sort of smoke rising thing, and I'll put that over the 10 symbol. So some of it is going to get obscured. In that respect, and that's fine by me. I'm okay with that happening. So yeah, I'm gonna have to select a color palette. Obviously, I'm just gonna pick something very red, something that will work in that way. But this is sort of where a lot of our things are gonna start coming together. Because yeah, I mean, the 10 symbol in the background is a bit rough. So it's not exactly perfect. It has the general idea of it. But yeah, I mean, again, as I say, it is only a matter of what, 1, 2, 3, yeah, it's only 4 strokes, only 4 brush strokes, and I did have to sort of polish up this one here, and I added some glow to it just so that it has a bit more going on that way. But the eye glow and that stuff I'll add in the last section of that during the detailed shading and everything like that, because that'll sort of fit more during that. It'll be easier to work around that sort of thing now while we're still in it'll be easier to work around with the paints without there being a glow on him of any kind, just so that I can see what I'm doing a bit more easily. But I'm probably going to have probably have the shadows over on this side and then the light coming in this side, because yeah, there's more of him here, so I want to have more of the light line on this side. So the light line will be on his left side, and then the soft light will be coming from the right, but it'll probably be very red. Right, okay. Yeah, that sounds alright to me. That sounds like that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I really need to cover too much here. I'm just more or less trying to get through this, because yeah, I ended up spending a lot longer on those colors than I would have liked. I'll get my background stuff probably pretty much done here. So yeah, I'll have to just do some of those, yeah, just have some red sort of fiery effects kind of work up through the background. Layer it up in such a way where it sort of just spreads into the black and it looks a little bit more natural. But yeah, yeah, okay, I think I'll just get on with this. I'll do these paints and then I'll be back to do detailed shading and all that other stuff. So yeah. Okay, we're in the home stretch now. That's our painted shading done. That was not too challenging. Everything is very red. That's our color palette. It's just shades of red. So it's not going to be getting too crazy. I think our lightest color skews slightly pink. But that's about it. We're going very red on this one. So I'll have a lot of little bits to do during this section. So predominantly, obviously I've got to do the detailed shading, which for his hair might be a bit of a pain. It's going to be more of a pain to do it on the light line, because I'll have to sort of feather it through. I'll have to do his eye glow as well, and I'll sort of do a little kind of streak coming out of it as well, which will sort of disperse outward, which should just sort of smear a little bit. In theory that should work. We'll see how it looks. And then all that stuff. But yeah, the gradient maps should probably sort of darken up the background a little bit, because I feel like the background still is just a little too bright for my liking as it stands at the moment. I obviously feathered through that smoke and everything, and I think that looks alright. I feel like, yeah, it just sort of needs more contrast, which we'll get once the gradient map comes in. So, yeah, okay. I'll get moving on this, and then after I've done this section, I'll do the rest of the gradient maps and then wrap up. So, yeah. Okay, that's all those bits done. That is our detailed shading, our light line, our glow, and our gradient map. First one. So the glow, I will turn off the gradient map while I talk about this because I've got a very intense one there. So I just got a sort of pinky white kind of reddy color. And I scribbled in a little bit of a dot in the middle of the eyes, and then I had a little squiggle that went out from the eyes, so it looks like a bit of a sort of an energy sort of wrapping around and kind of sparking out, which adds it does add that little bit more intensity. It's not necessarily like a super Akuma-ish thing to have like the energy coming out of the eyes. It would be more a thing if it was a sort of like a really long smear, because that's sort of like that sort of looks a bit more like Oni, kind of. It has that sort of element to it there. Yeah, I just wanted to include it because I think it looks cool and it adds a little bit more of the sort of intensity that I'm looking for. Now, the gradient map. So obviously, as you can see, it's all red with a little bit of a hint of a pinky color in there towards the top. So it just sort of richens out some of the colors a tiny bit. It's all very red. Nonetheless, I went for an overlay rather than a soft light. I normally use a soft light layer as my primary gradient map. I would normally use a soft light layer because it's just a little less subtle, or it's a little more subtle. It's not quite as intense. The overlay is typically too intense, I usually find. But this time, given that intensity is one of the things we're kind of going for here, I'm going to do an overlay. And I have it at a pretty high opacity, so the rest of our gradient maps probably don't need to be that crazy, because this one will do most of the work for us. So right. You've already seen the color, so I don't need to keep that up. Let's make some duplicates. Right, so another duplicate. Yeah, this is the thing. Whenever you get more overlays on top of each other, it just becomes absolutely eye-burning, eye-searing. Yeah, we don't want the luminosity below, I would say. Let's turn it down to 30%, just so I can still see what I'm doing. I'll definitely make it darker by putting it below. Do I want it to be dark? Well, it kind of destroys the glow. The glow on the 10 symbol in the background is pretty much entirely gone if it's below. Right, so we're going to set it to that, and we're going to set it to 15%, because this is a pretty intense luminosity layer this time. Ordinarily, it wouldn't be that crazy. Right, so let's get a duplicate of that. And let's set this one to be a color burn. What if I set it to be a multiply? Multiply doesn't really do anything. Or does it? It just sort of does what the luminosity does. Let's see, what does it look like there? Over everything, it makes everything a bit darker. Sort of blends a bit more there. And it's way too dark there. Here it doesn't look too bad because it sort of blends some of our smoke a little bit more. Our smoke becomes a bit darker here. I'm only going to be having it at 5% anyways. So how much of a difference is it really going to make it 5%? It's actually more useful here because it just darkens it just that tiny bit so you can see more of what's going on. Okay, that's all our gradient maps. Let me try and grab my texture here. Okay, so yeah, intensity is definitely what we've got. Intensity was what we were going for, and it is very much what we've got. So right. Let's see how our texture works, because we've got a lot of paint going on in the background, so a lot of the time the texture sort of doesn't love that too much. It can fight with you a little bit whenever you've got a lot of paint going on in the background, I find. So right, let's push this on, set this to be an overlay, and then turn it up. Actually don't mind that being kind of high, actually. 30%. Yeah, it sort of just brightens out his skin tone a little bit, because it's... Okay, let's not go too crazy. Let's have it be 20 and see how that looks. 25. And see how that looks on closer inspection. Yeah, it definitely disperses some of our smoke in the background a little bit more. The edges of the calligraphy also get a little bit bleary, but that's fine. We don't want it to seem too messy. We also don't want it to seem too uniform. By virtue of the way that the gradient maps are hitting here, the sort of eye glow is sort of getting a bit lost here. Well, I think that's actually kind of fine. I don't think we need it to be too pronounced. It's the sort of thing which you're really only going to be seeing if you're looking for it anyways. So it's not too bad, I suppose. It actually, yeah, with the texture it actually becomes a little easier to see. Yeah, and some of those shadows in his face become a little bit softened, so it's a little easier to see some of the details of his face. His many wrinkles on his face, and his pearly white teeth. Yeah, the glow on the 10 symbol just sort of comes back a little bit more now with the texture on. Yeah, it's just that little bit more visible. Yeah, okay, yeah, we definitely want the texture like this, I think. I think that's fine. I think I'm content with that. Okay, so this wasn't the hardest one in the world. I think it definitely came out in the final product a lot better than it looked in its base sketch. Because base sketch was a little rough. But I think ultimately it came out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with that. Very red. Very red. I suppose it's been a little bit since I've done one which has been red color palette. I think. Well, yeah, it has actually. It's been a little while since I've done something with a red color palette, which is strange because I normally use a lot of red color palettes. It's red or blue. They're some of the more common ones with a lot of the characters I just tend to choose, I suppose. Recently, I've been doing a lot more varied color palettes with a lot of the characters that I've been choosing. So yeah, you've been seeing some weirder ones. Some different ones, some weirder ones, some stuff that I wouldn't normally do a lot of the time. But yeah, it's actually been a little while since I've done a red one. I can't think of the last time I did a red one. Weird. But yeah, ultimately I think I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, I think all the sort of effects and everything coalesced into a way of where, yeah, it definitely is very intense. I think intensity is going to have to be one of the topics on this video because I've talked about it an awful lot. Same with, yeah, expressions and intensity. Yeah, I think that's what we've got this time because, yeah, that's a large portion of what we've been talking about. Yeah, maybe that light line was a bit intense, but I'm not going to change it now. It's funny that because of the way the gradient maps work, it's borderline invisible on his hair. You can't really see the light line on his hair. It's very much there, don't worry, but yeah, it is a little hard to see. Yeah. Anyways, I think I've said everything I needed to say. I talked a lot during this one, so yeah, this one will probably end up being a little longer because of that. Even though it's only slightly shorter than the last one I did, really, in terms of recording time. This is 4.5 hours. 4 hours and 40 minutes. So it's, yeah, it's not too far off of the last episode I did. That one was 5 hours of recording, anyways. So yeah, I think with all that said, I think I'll just start wrapping up. So right, I'll do my outro, and then that'll be that. So if you like the video, do whatever it is that you'd normally do, whether that be liking or not. I would of course prefer if you liked it, but I can't make you do that. So all I can do is politely suggest it, which I believe I have done. It's a lot of words just to say you could like the video. Same deal if you want to subscribe. Go for it. I would appreciate it. You don't have to do it. You've presumably seen the YouTube video before, so you know where the subscribe button is, meaning I don't have to tell you. But it's below the video. I didn't have to tell you, but I did. It was a courtesy. If you have a suggestion for what you'd like to see me draw in the future, you could leave a comment, politely worded. If you're not going to do it politely, just don't do it at all. I'd rather that at that point. And if you choose to watch the next video, I will see you next time. So, with all that said, that is us. I will say goodbye and I will leave you. So, bye-bye.